This video presentation examines sex work as a social problem. First, let's get a sociological perspective on sexual behavior within society. Societies control sexual behavior. They have a number of different ways of doing this. Sexual behavior has needed to be controlled by societies both in the past and in the present. Across time and space, so we see different ways of controlling sexual behavior in different cultures. Most cultures have cultural scripts. These are rules about what you can and can't do sexually, who you can and cannot have sex with. Cultural scripts guide our rules about sex in our everyday life. Some societies practice female genital mutilation. This is the term that Westerners use to describe the circumcision of young girls. The circumcision is intended to keep women from being promiscuous, and so that when they get married, they remain a virgin. A lot of societies use religion to inhibit the sexual behavior, especially among young girls. So you can see how sexual behavior has political connotations or political implications to it. The conflict and feminist perspective really focus and hone in on these political aspects of sex. So, for example, they talk about how sex is often used to shame women. A woman who has multiple partners is seen as a shameful individual and is called derogatory terms. In general, the sexual freedom of women tends to be repressed in many societies, especially male-dominated patriarchal societies. In essence, we construct a situation where if a woman withholds from having sex, she is referred to as a prude, and if she gives into her sexual desires, she is referred to as a slut. Sometimes that those are the only two boxes that you can put women in. So there's multiple types of sex work. We can move into what the main topic of this presentation is now. Sex work in general is just the exchange of sexual services, performances, or products, including physical contact or direct and indirect sexual stimulation in exchange for money. So you have pornographic film actors, prostitution that ranges from street prostitutes to brothels all the way to escorts. And then you have professional erotic dancers or strip dancers as they're more commonly referred to. We're going to focus in on street prostitution for the most part of this presentation. Just to kind of keep in mind what the difference is between street prostitution and, say, someone like an escort. A street prostitute is more exposed out in the open in the public streets usually. They experience higher rates of violence. They're stigmatized more. They're targeted more by police, and they tend to come from lower socioeconomic status, experience more desperate situations. An escort, on the other hand, has a few more advantages. They mainly do their work indoors. They do their communication over the phone or over the internet or through text messaging. They can pass as dates at restaurants and hotels. So they do get some benefits compared to street work. The main problem that we're going to focus on, or social problem we're going to focus on, is street prostitution. So street prostitution in general is illegal in all but some counties in Nevada. However, this does not prevent it from happening, obviously. All this creates is an illegal black market for street prostitution or for sex. Street prostitutes have the highest death rate of any profession that in the U.S. Every year, 459 out of 100,000 prostitutes die annually. Normally, the cause of death is violence or drug overdose. Prostitution is a multi-billion-dollar a year trade. So one study that we're going to look at up close is a study by Kobina and Oslin. This was done back in 2011. The study found that prostitution related heavily to the age of first prostitute act. So age was a huge impact on the pathway of these women. The way that they got their sample was at a center that took women who were former prostitutes in and kind of helped them get their life back to a quote unquote um, normal existence. So they had a total of 40, n equals 40. That's the sample size. So there were 40 of these women at this center. And as she started talking to these women and interviewing them, she realized that the age of entry was huge in determining their lives and their reasons for entering prostitution and what impact they had from prostitution. The ages of these women range from 20 to 60 years of age, with an average age of 36.5. So let's take a look at the 18 and under street workers that these researchers interviewed. The reasons for their entrance into prostitution was to escape poverty, to escape abuse at home, to reclaim control of their lives. So escaping a troubled home, or thinking that prostitution was going to somehow make them independent. They would often see other women prostituting in their neighborhood and notice that with it comes money and independence. And so the 18 and under group was really interested in this aspect of prostitution. The other aspect of the 18 and under group was that prostitution was normalized in their environment. Like I mentioned, they saw other women involved in it, sometimes their family members, mothers who were also prostitutes or former prostitutes, fathers who were pimps. So the prostitution was normal to them, and in fact, oftentimes was seen as glamorous, especially compared to working at McDonald's or not having a job at all, which was a reality for a lot of these young girls. So, for example, you have Callie, who committed her first prostitution act at 11 years of age. She says that my grandmother was engaged in a lot of activities such as selling drugs, doing drugs, renting out rooms of her house, and stuff like that. So staying was basically out of the question because she had so many men in the house and I had been sexually molested and raped a lot of times. So I didn't want to stay there anymore and put up with that. So you can see that Callie was using prostitution as a way to escape this abuse in her grandmother's home. Yvette, on the other hand, had a father who was a pimp. And so she says, I wanted to be with my dad. And of course, these things were going on in my dad's household because I told you my dad was a dope dealer and pimp. So that's when I became attracted to the lifestyle, the glamour part of it, you know. I saw the dressing up and the makeup, and really that was the attraction to me. So you can see her pointing out the glamour involved in her idea of what a prostitute is, and you can see that it was normalized in her eyes. Then you have the 19 or older group. They first did their prostitution act when they were 19 or older. And so these women had family of drug history of drug abuse. 65% of them entered prostitution to pay for their drugs. They were, compared to the younger group, they were morally conflicted about prostitution. So it's not like they wanted to do it, but they saw it as a means of survival. They saw it as kind of the last resort. So, for example, Chanel did so to sustain a drug habit. Because of my drug addiction, I found out that it would enable me to get money for drugs. I could go out there and be assertive and get it myself. So here's a table that kind of sums up everything I talked about. The 18 and under first act of prostitution did so to flee abuse and reclaim control, and saw prostitution as normal. Meanwhile, the 18 and up used it to sustain drug addiction, and they saw prostitution as a means of survival. Only 3 of the 40 women in the sample did not fit any of these criteria. So what does this mean? Well, this tells us that prostitutes come from an impoverished environment. These sex workers also differ in their age of being in their profession based on when they entered. So it makes sense that if you start younger, you're in longer, right? So if they started young, the average was about 22 years if they started before the age of 18. The average for women who started after they were 18 was only 8 years. They only spent 8 years as a sex worker. Through this research, we learned that sex work is dangerous. A lot of the women shared violent encounters, extortion, all sorts of stigmatization that occurred. So even the younger ones, the reason that they left is they realized it's not as glamorous as I thought it would be. So If we want to take some time to kind of think about what we just reviewed, maybe we can ask ourselves, like, what are some common misconceptions of sex workers? Um, I feel oftentimes they get kind of thrown under the bus. They're not really seen as real people and they get dehumanized a lot of times. But we have to remember that there's a human being behind that particular role in society and that everyone kind of has their own story and their own reasons for doing things. So another question is, what outcomes might legalization and unionization of sex work have on individuals in society? So, for example, you have the red light district in the Netherlands, where individuals can go and legally purchase sex from women. These women um, find themselves in a more safe and empowered position than women who are sex workers out on the street in the United States. They're less exploitable. They're less likely to get extorted by pimps and things like that. Um, your answer to this question, whether you think prostitution should be legalized or not, will probably largely depend on your upbringing. So that's another important kind of thing to question about ourselves is, will the way I answer be influenced by what I was taught as a kid growing up? Right? More than likely than not, it will. In terms of solutions on a social level, when you have a social problem, you need social solutions. Right? You can't just tell these women to stop doing it because that's not going to work. It's not an individual problem, it's a societal problem. So we need social solutions. Um, so we can start with women at risk or young girls who are at risk. We know that these women come from impoverished backgrounds, so we need to provide resources to these young girls, provide leadership, mentors, guardians, housing, since a lot of these girls were escaping abuse in their own homes. We need to provide some kind of legal employment that is fulfilling at the same time, that will lead them towards a career. And if they are getting involved in drugs and alcohol at an early age, that means maintaining sobriety and helping them to achieve that. In terms of what about when women are already engaged in prostitution, what can you do? Well, you can arrest them, charge them with a crime, fine them, but it's unclear, at least based on the data that we have, whether the arrests really have any impact, at least long-term impacts. So when police do raids on prostitutes and really kind of quote unquote clean up the streets, it's not sure if it has any long-lasting effects. In Orange County, there are a couple of cities that have taken on different approaches. So in Anaheim, they have tried to connect the women with services, and they have gone after the pimps instead. They've also focused on the Johns. Johns are clients who purchase sex work. So John schools are another alternative to jail for these men, usually, who are purchasing sex. So a John school, I'll explain in a bit, but it started in San Francisco and it has since spread to LA and Orange County as well as San Diego. So if a man gets caught purchasing sex, they're charged, but their charges are dismissed if they complete an 8-hour or sometimes longer diversion class. And in the class, they learn about all sorts of things, about how sex work harms women, about how there's there's alternative ways of getting sexual relief and things like that. So the goal is diversion, and they have to pay a fee to go to this John school. The money that they pay goes to operate the John schools, but to also support things like police stings and social services directed to sex workers or former sex workers. I'll include a couple of additional resources, including the research study you can read in full on my PowerPoint slides. You can just click on full screen when you hit this slide, and you can click on any of these links to learn more and read more about this social problem. So that's it for now. I will see you or not see you, but I will talk to you on the next lesson. Bye now.